Activated, your window into how we can change the way in which we aspire for persons with disabilities, how we change our expectations from seeing inability to expecting ability. Activated takes us on a journey of taking lessons from persons with disabilities in how we must do things differently to unleash the contributions persons with disabilities can and must make to building a disability-inclusive Mzansi. Hello and welcome to Activated with me, your host, Taryn Tomlinson. The white paper on the rights of persons with disabilities directs that government develops measures to protect the mental health of persons with disabilities, though persons with disabilities continue to be discriminated against. The situation is even more dire for persons with psychosocial disabilities and their families, who even within the disability sector experience discrimination and marginalisation. But when we change the narrative, this too can change. When we embrace and unconditionally accept persons with mental health challenges, it changes not only their life outcomes, but ours too. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get activated. In today's show, we meet SIFISO MKHASIBE, a mental health activist who is very passionate about mental health issues. We meet CHARLENE, who was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia in 1991, and her journey since then has exposed her to the challenges experienced by persons with mental disorders. Our studio guest this week is Nikki Abdiner, a clinical psychologist, international keynote speaker, founder of Nikki's Drive, disability rights activist, trainer and entrepreneur. In 2007, SIFISO MKHASIBE was in his early 20s when he was diagnosed as having bipolar mood disorder. This changed the trajectory of his life and he became passionate about mental health issues. Through his activism, he encourages mental health care users from all over South Africa to let their voices be heard and help advocate for the rights of persons with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities. He also addresses mental health issues on social media to help fight stigma and discrimination in South African communities. Let's meet him. Much of the pressure in psychiatric hospitals and wards could be lifted by community-based mental health facilities, particularly for those patients who are not seriously ill, but who do not have the capacity to fend for themselves. It is also much cheaper maintaining patients in these facilities compared to in hospitals, and they are often closer to their relatives.
We need to be more educated in terms of what mental illness is about. We shouldn't, just because umuntu une mental illness, put simvalele endlini or simshaye or we chain them to a tree or, we say those type of things. So it's against human rights about at the same time. And I think the discrimination and the stigma that's around it, they don't come out to speak and say, okay, fine, I'm mental illness. This is my story. This is what I went through. These are the type of treatments, and we're right and be normal again. Because I want to understand it's a chemical imbalance in the brain. Anything medication in order for you to be balanced, and then you can be a productive member in society. I believe there can be a balance in terms of your belief. What do you believe in? In my case, the treatment from Isangoma and the traditional healer, what didn't work. In my opinion, I'd say that those two can coexist as long as both are being looked at and tried. I believe the role that family members is to identify first kuti umuntu has a mental illness or a mental health problem. If family can also attend support groups in terms of good war namanje bakhuluma namanye ama family members ukuthi okay fine mina uSifiso ngumsupport kanje, or what else can I do ukuthi ngikwazi umsupport in terms of a mental health condition yakhe. I'd want ukuthi kube nama-volunteers abantu abazoza esibhedlela bazokhuluma nathi in terms of ukuthi okay fine now you've got this issue, the mental illness onayo, this is what it's about, bas-educating ngayo, basitshele ngayo ukuthi how can we get support, and just to be there as a umndeni and as a community at large, to be able to assist. I think into eziningi as well is to have a support group in different places where people are free to come and speak about issues about FISO. Those people that abathole usizo and are currently on medication and they're stable, then they should come out and speak, even if it's on TV, on radio, just to share their life stories in terms of what they went through, what has worked for them, and where are they now.
Dit is soms baie moeilik om te verstaan hoe kinders sommer net verdwyn en ons is geneig om die ouers te blameer en te oordeel. Dit is baie belangrik om die ouers te ondersteun, selfs is dit net 'n teken van vriendelikheid. Coming up after the break, in the studio with us is Nikki Abdiner, a clinical psychologist who will help us gain a deeper understanding of mental health. We will also hear more from CHARLENE, founder of the Global Mental Health Peer Network. Welcome back. Nikki Abdiner is an international keynote speaker, registered clinical psychologist, and founder of the non-profit Nikki's Drive. She's based in Cape Town, South Africa, where she runs her clinical practice. She's always commended on being a credible agent of change, whether you are connecting with her one-on-one or from an audience. Hello, Nikki, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Activated.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Nikki, you are a psychologist and you are a mentor. You're also a public speaker. To what extent has having a disability informed your career choices?
Well, I always like to say that I'm a realistic optimist. So growing up without arms, I certainly knew that going into dentistry was not going to be an option for me. But a life experience actually is what ignited my passion to become a clinical psychologist. When I was in high school, I met a new friend and she struggled with depression and anxiety. And it was really the first time for me to actually recognize how a psychological challenge can impact on your functioning as much as a physical one. So I saw that the two of us were striving for the same sense of identity, but just with different types of struggles. So that really motivated me to continue in a career in psychology.
That's actually what I want to get into, because I don't think many people really know, how important words are and how important attitudes are. But can you maybe explain to us, how does society's perception influence the mental health of someone with a disability?
I always believe that every human has the desire to be accepted and also to feel connected. And I think because of society's barriers, whether they're physical ones or attitudinal barriers, they often leave people with disabilities feeling very disconnected, excluded, and maybe even dismissed. And I think that as a psychologist, I know that is the breeding ground for mental health problems. So I really believe that if we target those barriers, we know about the physical barriers, building more ramps, making places more accessible for all disabilities, but also our attitudes towards people with disabilities. Take the time to engage, understand the human behind the disability.
Where you're not just seeing the disability, as you say, but you're seeing the person
as a whole.
As a whole, and treating the person as such. We don't treat people differently because they've got green eyes or brown eyes.
Yes, exactly.
So, I'd really like to get into as well some of your great knowledge. What tips and advice could you give for persons with disabilities that might be struggling with, their mental health?
Well, I think primarily what has worked for me over the years in thinking about my own mental health and looking after myself is that I've always strived to focus on what I can do, not on what I can't. It comes from positive psychology. The premise is don't ignore what is wrong, but focus more on what is right. So I think whether you have a physical disability or a hidden disability is to better understand what your limitations are, and then you can start focusing on your strengths and compensating for some of the things you might be struggling with.
Nikki, it's been so great to chat with you, but before we go, I'd really like to know, is there any lasting words that you would like to leave from a psychological point on how people can better protect their mental health?
I think the main message is not to be afraid to ask for help. You know, our greatest strength can be our vulnerability. And if we think of ourselves as young children, the activity and optimism that we had as a young child, we believed we were absolutely invincible. But what changes over time? We start to compare ourselves to others and doubt our own abilities. I think when we want to truly embrace optimism and be a self-advocate for disabilities and mental health, we've got to realize if we access our vulnerability, that we open to the potential failures or setbacks, then we can truly be our greatest strengths.
Absolutely. I love that. We can truly be our greatest strengths. Thank you so much for coming along and joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Taryn.
CHARLENE SUNKEL, aktivis, skrywer en dramaturg, was 'n sterk voorstander van 'n bewusmaking van geestesgesondheid. Kom ons vind uit meer oor haar reis en haar onderneming, die Global Mental Health Peer Network.
My name is CHARLENE SUNKEL. I'm the founder and CEO of the Global Mental Health Peer Network, which is an international lived experience organization, basically an organization of people with mental health conditions. And I myself have a lived experience with schizophrenia. The Global Mental Health Peer Network emerged from my own lived experience with a mental health condition, kind of losing my voice for that first part, where I experienced a lot of stigma in society. I also experienced a lot of human rights violations that stemmed from stigma, also within the mental health care system, but also outside. And years back, more than 20 years back, I decided to get into mental health advocacy work and human rights. And eventually I did it at a provincial level and then a national level, and now I've done it in a global level. Now, why I established it is to bring all these people with mental health conditions out of isolation, and kind of where we speak as one voice, where we have a platform to share our views, our perspectives, our experiences, and kind of make people understand and show them that we are human beings. We don't need to be isolated, we can contribute and add great value to society.
When I was diagnosed with schizophrenia in the early 1990s, I was told that I would not be able to live a so-called normal life or achieve at anything.
We believe strongly in partnerships. We believe that people with psychosocial disabilities must be a key partner in everything, whether it's policy development and review, service development and implementation. We believe that nothing can change without having everybody together, whether it's traditional leaders, professionals in the field, community, family members, and us. Only then can we really change things for the better. I think if everybody just start talking more about mental health conditions, normalize it. Like when you have a flu, you can tell someone, your friend or neighbor, I have flu. It should be that kind of conversation. And I think families and everybody must also not be afraid to ask a person, so how does it feel like living with a mental health condition? What can I do to support you? Those questions, keep it open, but at the same time, it's also important to create a safe space for that person to share their experiences and what they need from others to support them. My call for solidarity is definitely to appreciate and celebrate diversity. It doesn't matter if we're all different or the same or similar. It doesn't depict our value and what we can add and contribute to society. And I think being diverse, we can learn so much more from each other and achieve so much more from who we are and where we come from. For us to kind of make a better world for people with all disabilities, I think it's important that we put people with disabilities at the center of policy and practice, where we as people with disabilities can help guide policymakers and government to achieve their objectives and goals.
Na die advertentiebreek ontmoet ons vir Lee Lambert, 'n finale jaarstudent aan die Universiteit van die Wes-Kaap wat die afgelope 7 jaar erg met geestesgestremdheid sukkel en 'n mentor is vir verskeie studente. Welkom terug. In ons weeklikse bulletin vind ons uit hoe sport gebruik word om geestesgesondheid positief te beïnvloed en ons leer meer oor aanpassende brandeplankryterapie.
Made for More is an organisation to include, equip and empower people with disabilities through sport. So we started adaptive surfing in 2014. I'm a surfer myself, so just experiencing the ocean and the therapy of the ocean and what it can do for you, I just wanted people to experience that. I think for so many people with disabilities, they think that they can't do anything until they're introduced to something that they can do.
I never actually thought that I would actually get to meet the ocean because I've been like I'm in a wheelchair.
I'm Tracy McCarr. I'm a South African parasurfer and is ranked number 2 in the world. What it does for me, the freedom. It's amazing to be out there in the surf, to be able to be one with the ocean.
Igama lami nguSabelo Ngene. Namhlanje nje ngidlala i-adaptive surfing. Zonke lezi zinto lezi zishintshile impilo yami ngoba manje sengumuntu onomqondo ovulekile and futhi sengiyakwazi ukubuka izinto ezibukeka zingezinhle kubantu phinde kodwa ngiyibone nges-right.
I've got 2 very young children and I was worried that they were going to grow up in Durban never having been to the beach. So my wife agreed to push me in a beach wheelchair, and when we came down we saw there were all sorts of disabilities and I didn't feel like my disabilities were of the nature that theirs were, and so I just sat off to the side in the shade and watched them. And next thing, one of the guys, Leon, came up to me and said, "Do you want to surf?" And without thinking, I said yes, and 20 minutes later I was in the water.
In my 10de dae voor die rolstoel het ek probeer om brandeplank te ry, maar ek kon nie langer as 10 sekondes op die bors staan nie. So ek dink ek gaan maar probeer om te seil. Lee Lambert struggles with severe mental disabilities. Yet despite her own struggles, she is a pillar of strength and mentor for students on campus. Let's find out more.
Ek is gediagnoseer met bipolar mood disorder en borderline personality disorder. Ek het in die universiteit toe gekom, ek sou LLB studeer het en ek het besluit ek wil dit doen nie. Ek het my veld verander. Het was in die begin bietjie moeilik om aan te pas en ek het toe later begin deelneem aan student leadership programme, soos ek is deel van PASMA by die Disability Unit op campus. Het hulle my in die begin van laas jaar gekies as die nuwe voorsitter van DASA. DASA staan vir Differently Able Students Assembly op universiteit. Ek dink nie daar is eintlik acts of solidarity op campus om eerlik te wees. Vra ons nie gereeld ons mede-leerders of so nie, is jy okay, is daar enigiets waar ons mee kan help nie. Dus ek weet daar is so baie studente wat disabilities het op die universiteit, en nie net mental disabilities nie, maar hulle sukkel verskriklik. Ek dink die universiteit moet begin om meer sielkundiges aan te stel, want nie net studente met mental disabilities nodig sielkundiges nie, maar studente met disabilities in general. So hulle moet dit begin doen en ek dink hulle moet begin om te jaag om die stigma rondom disabilities in general te breek. My advies aan studente met disabilities is om altyd jou waarheid te dra en om nie weg te kruip in hy donker hoeke nie. Om eerlik te wees met wie jy is en wat jy wil hê die lewe uit. Want ek dink persoonlik om jouself te bejammer gaan net laat ons baie swakker doen en meer hulp nodig. Ek dink ons moet, we have to own who we are, want after all, dit is nie wie jy is nie, dit is maar net 'n siekte of 'n disability. Soos ek het 'n liedjie gehoor wat my pa vir my gestuur het, die liedjie sê, people will find you, but they will not define you. Ons moet onsself define. Jy is nie anders nie, jy is net soveel werd as iemand wat nie 'n disability het nie.
The human mind is complex, and what may seem to be a disability may prove to be one's greatest ability, such as in the case of autistic musical savants. One such beautiful mind is Russell Fox, a mentalist and illusionist who, despite being on the ADHD and autism spectrum, has learned to hone his mind to awe and inspire people across the country. Geniet julle dag, tot volgende week, selfde tyd, slegs op SABC2, You Belong.
What's up, guys? Russell Fox, magician, staying here with Sebastian Ola at Rhodes Memorial. I don't dig it.
Me neither. So, I think we're gonna do something about it. Watch this.
Three, 2, 1, go. That's better.